And I would like to hand over the floor to Yuri. Yuri, please.
I will share my slides. A moment.
Yes, please.
Are my slides visible?
Yes.
Good.
Very nice.
So, dear colleagues, greetings from Kyiv. Thank you for attending this event. And also I am grateful to Scinece4Peace Forum and to Hans Jung for organizing this event. My name is Yuri Shelezhenko. I am a director of the Institute of Peace and Law. We gathered today to discuss the so-called Trump's peace plan, though this name is questionable for two reasons. Firstly, while Trump is a main driver behind this initiative and seems to gain maximum benefit from it, real authors are two tycoons close to Putin and Trump, Kirill Dmitriev of Russia and Steve Witkoff of United States. Secondly, the peace mentioned in the title is a bit misleading word. As you could see from this map, from the CNN newscast that I placed on my first slide, the main feature of the plan and the first point of disagreement is territorial question. Russia illegally occupied a large part of Ukraine. It is contrary to international law. What the plan says is that Crimea, Luhansk, and Donetsk, they are red on the map, will be recognized de facto Russian territories, and Ukraine is expected to give up voluntarily lands that Russia for a long time tries to conquer without success. These territories are by violet on the map. Since it is de facto, not de jure recognition, and it looks like a grave injustice to force a victim of invasion to give up lands to aggressor, it means that the conflict will not be resolved by this plan. So it is a plan not for peace, but rather for a fragile ceasefire, giving time to preparations for escalation of war in Europe, which are underway, and preventing a devastating losses of Ukraine from current Russian offensive. So context is important. Context is this. According to the Independent International Commission of Inquiry on Ukraine, created by the United Nations, the armed conflict initiated by the Russian Federation's aggression against Ukraine has led to over 12,000 killed and more than 29,000 injured civilians. Talking about military losses, there are different numbers. One of estimations is 700,000 military losses in main power on Russian side and 400,000 losses on Ukrainian side. Russian population is bigger, so they are offending, so they take more losses. Also, it is large-scale destruction and damage to civilian dwellings and infrastructure, grave violations of international human rights, international humanitarian law, as well as a lot of corresponding crimes. For example, on occupied territories of Ukraine, there are arbitrary detentions, systemic practices of torture, military indoctrination of children, conscription, which is illegal when conducted by occupying force, and so on and so on and so on. You could see on this slide horrible pictures. On the top, it is headquarters of the National Academy of Legal Sciences of Ukraine in Kharkiv, destroyed by Russian strike. And on the bottom, it is a house in Kiev, not very distant from my house, a house hit by Russian drone, and he lost his apartment and his library, a lot of books on peace. It was indeed a horrible night, and we have a lot of troubling nights with Russian strikes. Devastating strikes of Russian army continues on Ukrainian cities, on Ukrainian energy infrastructure. Intensive advance in the east of Ukraine continues. There are power outages every day, several hours, sometimes even large part of day, and during the winter, according to some experts, almost whole day could be without electricity, and maybe even without heating. If Russia continues this attacks on Ukrainian civilian infrastructure. And of course, Ukraine continues retaliatory strikes on Russian energy infrastructure, on refineries, on shadow fleet selling oil and so on. And we see a lot of preparations for escalation. Russia raised taxes to finance war. Cruel military mobilization in Ukraine. In European countries, there are preparations to reintroduce conscription, and we see a student strike in Germany against the proposed reintroduce of conscription. Opponents of war are persecuted very severely in Russia, and unfortunately in Ukraine too. We have militarist and democratic tendencies. In Russia, a lot of international informational channels are just cut by censorship. And messengers such as WhatsApp and so on are replaced with state approved, state demanded messengers to censor and to allow the propaganda plays main role in public opinion. In these circumstances, so-called Trump's peace plan was an unexpected development, and diplomacy around it was indeed tour de force. Interestingly, also that key negotiators are exposed in corruption scandals. In the beginning of this so-called peace plan, Steve Witkoff, the business partner of Trump, profiting from some trade with Russia, Kirill Dmitriev, close to shadow money of President Putin, who done a lot to appropriate public money. Russian people are suffering from big military expenses instead of welfare. And Russia is not a very wealthy country. A lot of public goods are taken by Moscow. So a part of it, Putin's regime takes a lot of money from public purse to Putin's palaces and luxury style of life and so on. And in Ukraine, we see corrupted negotiators involved in the Mindish scandal around war profiteering. Umerov, Yermak, recently he was resigned from his position of head of office of president and so on. And in the United States, this peace plan, actually its existence was leaked at the high point of scandal around the Epstein files. And it is possible that whole peace plan was invented to distract from scandals in United States to find a new focus of public attention and also maybe to speculate on stock market with shares of arms industry. The price holds down with the short-term empty hopes for peace, despite the underlying massive investments in war. There is, of course, growing military spending over the world. And it is possible there is unethical trading with inside knowledge. And here you have your profit from knowing that the peace plan will be leaked. You are buying the stocks of arms industry when hopes for peace makes the stocks more cheaper. And then, since there are a lot of public budgets for war, of course, the stocks will rise because a lot of taxpayers' money will be spent on war. And this way, those who have inside knowledge, i.e., President Trump, his family, and related businesses could profit from this leak of peace plan. So timeline was that on 19th November, existence of the plan was leaked. On 20th, New York Times published 28 points in famous 28 points, mostly reflecting Russian interests. On 23rd November, European counter-proposal developed by UK, by France, by Germany, mostly correcting the most shameless ideas of profiteering from Trump and appeasing Russia. On 24th November, there was meeting in Geneva between Ukrainians, Europeans, and United States representatives. From 28 points, 19 points left. On the same days, Russia welcomed some Trump's points and rejected European proposals because Europe removed impunity of Russia, removed this quiet legalization of Russian territorial gains from conquest and so on, and it is, of course, inappropriate for Russia. On 25th October, Dmitry Witkov conversations leaked, which shows that this plan was mostly developed by Russian side, and the United States just took it to find some way to appease Russia. On 27th November, there was European Parliament's resolution regarding the leading role of Europe, regarding the strengthening of Europe's security, and so on. On 28th November, Putin threatened to take disputed territories by force, and Trump also said that Ukraine need to make peace deal or Russia will take the territories anyway. On 30th November, there were negotiations in Florida between the United States and Ukraine. And yesterday there were negotiations in Moscow. A result of negotiations, no deal, and Putin threatened he is ready to war with Europe. Of course, to defensive war, but anyone who wants to wage war now says it is defense. It is, of course, threats to escalate, veiled by some rhetorics of defense, so-called. The plan, as published by New York Post, essentially Ukraine gains ceasefire, Russia gains lands and returns to some degree to relations with the West, have place on the table in G8, some sanctions lifted and so on. The trade between United States and Russia is the main incentive. So United States is trying to use whole its economic power and military power as leverage to influence Russia. And for United States, it is important to force Russia. Trump is trying to force Russia to not fully be dependent on China, but become more neutral in competition and in growing tensions between United States and China, because United States want global dominance. And for that end, since it is competition between United States and China for global dominance, United States wants Russia on United States side, ideally, or at least neutral. And it is not going to happen because Russia currently is very dependent on China, and so according to many experts, according to public arrangements, we saw this meetings between Putin and Xi. It is very unlikely that Russia will be neutral or even on the United States side. And I think in the United States there is clear understanding that in this geopolitical rivalry, Russia will not be neutral or on American side. And because of that, such peace plans are intended rather to distract, for example, to allow Trump safely continue his adventurism in Venezuela without increasing military support from geopolitical rivals and so on. It is additionally to this Epstein thing. So it is basically some play for time, some play for attempts to promise something without actually committing to these promises. And this plan is very vividly shows desire to profit from Russian assets in Europe. and it was outrageous that United States wants just a half of Russian assets in Europe. But as we could remember, Trump once said that he will not defend Europe. American army will not protect Europe if Europe is not paying. And I think creating these channels for some sort of talks with Russia, it is not only a way to discuss some basic relations needed to prevent global nuclear war, but also it is a way to hold the Europeans scared and spending a lot of money for American weapons, which is profitable for American military industry. And this plan starts from Ukraine's sovereignty will be confirmed. But from what is said in the next points, Ukraine lose lands. There is a cap on size of Ukrainian military, and Ukraine needs to change internal politics as Russia wishes, and so on. So this first point is very questionable. We could see behind this plan contradictory interests. What Ukraine wants is security guarantees, indeed sovereignty, real sovereignty, not this idea that we will decide without you what size of your army should be, but we will not limit our own armies. I think that in the 21st century, everyone should understand that having weapons, especially nuclear weapons, is not a way to security. It is rather a way to endanger neighbors and therefore be endangered from defense preparation or offense preparation of neighbors. But according to old style thinking, security guarantees from militarists is ability to threaten others without thinking about what others will prepare to threat you in return. This paradox of security. The more you prepare for war, thinking you are preparing for peace, the more you are threatened by preparations of others. And one day, preparations for war will end in actual outburst of violence. Ukraine is interested in regaining occupied territories, helping people to return to peaceful life, because there are a lot of internally displaced persons and a lot of refugees. And Ukraine is interested in Euro-Atlantic integration because centuries of imperialist yoke of Russia in Ukraine created a huge trauma. And current aggression deepened this wound, salted these wounds. It is a big pain, and Ukraine wants closer relations to the West. And Ukraine wants to rebuild after all destruction and death caused by Russian army. Russia wants security guarantees. First of all, guarantees of security, preservation of corrupted regime, tyrannical regime of Putin. Russia wants global leadership, this great power status. Russia wants Ukrainian territories, which they decided it is Russian territories because so-called Russian speakers live there. This story with Russian speakers is interesting because for Putin, Russian speaker means someone who not just speak Russian. There are a lot of Russian speakers killed by Russian army among civilians, including in Kharkiv. But they spoke about freedom, they spoke about better world, they spoke about modernization, and it is not a conservative authoritarian agenda of Putin. For Putin, Russian speakers are those who are consuming Russian propaganda. And consuming of Russian propaganda means trusting Putin and wanting his authoritarian rule to come to land. So this whole notion of Russian speaking as some part of problem and conflict means simply that Ukrainian people, either Ukrainian speaking or Russian speaking, are resilient to Russian propaganda and resilient, actually resisting ambitions of Russia to rule in near abroad, to have a sphere of influence. Because of this unwilling of Ukrainians to recognize Russia as imperial power in this region of the world, it is a failure of Russian soft power, and instead of changing and contributing to world peace, not by some sort of hard power and militarism, but by science, art, and so on and so on, Putin made the choice to just take these lands and impose his dictatorship. And he intends to continue it because he don't have any other notions of great power. For him, great power, it is first of all ability to impose militarily his interests on others. Also, Russia don't want NATO at the borders because NATO is, of course, instrument of militarist power of the Western Bloc, first of all, of United States. And a part of Ukraine and Russia, there are other interested stockholders, and this conflict is bigger than Ukraine and Russia. So there is European Union, for a long time security client of United States. European Union wants security guarantees, autonomy, to become independent player with taking part in global leadership, not having United States decide instead of European Union. And because of this old style thinking, European Union also is trying to militarize. European Union wants economic growth, not allowing United States to have all oxygen and money taken from Europe. And there are a lot of trust in the NATO. It is a long-term problem, and it is also a result of stationing of American troops after the Second World War in Europe. The United States wants security guarantees, mostly securing position of nation number one in the world, preeminent global power, as they say. Global leadership, actually the top position in global leadership. Economic dominance, United States wants to be number one everywhere, and United States, as I already said, wants that the European Union pay more to NATO to security arrangements. And this Trump's plan, it includes huge gains to United States, and it is transparent that Trump wants personal benefits from it, including to become a chair of this Peace Council. Why it is non-starter? Because there are red lines which are not allowing this all stakeholders to agree. Because Ukraine will not surrender any lands. Ukraine will not surrender sovereignty, including in cultural questions, including in questions of security arrangements. Ukraine will not allow Russian veto on Ukrainian policies choices, including defense arrangements, and Ukraine will not allow Russia to not pay for war crimes. European Union will not allow Russian sphere of influence in Europe. European Union will not allow Ukraine surrender because after Ukraine surrender, Russia will have upper hand to attempt to include the European Union in sphere of influence. And if soft power will fail in Europe, hard power could be used. And also for European Union as a community based on values of democracy and rule of law, impunity for war crimes also is unacceptable. For United States, a red line is war of attrition waged by Russia with support of with backing, economic backing of China. This war of attrition causes stagnation of American economy, and it undermines American position as number one in the world. So it is a red line. Russia and China controlling European markets. And it will certainly a big risk, especially if Ukraine will surrender and there will be no agreement, no arrangement between the United States and Russia. There will be more intensive competition with Russia on China's side. If United States manage to have some economic arrangements with Russia, some competition with competitive advantage with China for the United States could be possible. And of course, for United States and Russia, nuclear escalation as countries with bigger nuclear arsenals, they both interested not to escalate to the degree when nuclear weapons could be used. But on both sides, we saw readiness to boast and saber rattling with nukes. Trump organized these nuclear tests, and Russia currently said that they could easily destroy Europe and so on. So it is very precarious. So to conclude, regarding this Trump peace plan, we have radically different positions. Different positions on interested sides among stakeholders, and these different positions made peace deal a non-starter. Ukrainian government is not going to give up lands, NATO aspirations, sovereignty. Russia is not going to give up territorial claims, and this imperialist big brother demands to Ukraine. Don't join NATO, you belong to post-Soviet space. Putin thinks that Ukraine could surrender because of military defeats, but he could get under this military pressure nothing more than a ceasefire, because Ukraine is a part of long-term security arrangements between the European Union and the United States, and no peace plan could change this reality planned and financed for many years ahead. This promises of peace is only short-term play for some tactical, not strategic goals. Ceasefire could be advantage to everyone except for the aggressor. Russia is going to continue conquest. Russia is not exhausted enough. So unfortunately, we don't see any willing on Russian side to have this ceasefire. Trump's plan is mainly aimed at asserting global leadership of United States and economic interests, as well as Trump's personal interests, including power grab, curbing domestic unrest, and market speculations. United States-Russia secret talks, where the plan was drafted, reflect current dynamics of great power balance, where the United States tries to outmaneuver China and create more deep dependence of European Union on military power of United States and more economic dependency, asserting the leadership role of United States in the world. It is like conclusions regarding what is going on high levels of current old state politics. I think it is very important to say that this old style politics with questionable peace plans developed behind closed doors, serving mostly some corrupted interests and preserving the militarist authoritarian tendencies and war profiteering. This is not what humankind need. What we really need, what a real peace plan is needed. We need agreement between peoples rather than militarized governments on how to resist non-violently all wars and militarism. And the role of the academy is a key, because power structures, systemic violence is based on some archaic tendencies, on ignorance, on lack of knowledge how to organize peaceful life. To change the world, we need a lot of research, a lot of studies, a lot of actually studying how in the past peace by peaceful means was achieved, how in the past people resisted war and militarism by non-violent means, and there is a large databases of non-violent actions, of movements of popular resistance to authoritarianism, corruption, militarism, for democratic changes, and hundreds of effective methods of nonviolent resistance to systemic violence. And this could help us to develop knowledge-based peace plans for better policies in the interests of people, not in interests of corrupted dictators. And my final slide in this logics regarding our work for knowledge-based peace here in Ukraine. The Institute of Peace and Law I represent is a scholarly arm of the Ukrainian pacifist movement that emerged after Free Civilian School of Pacifism, and it shares the ideas of peace agenda for Ukraine and the world statement made in 2022 and more new vision, Ukrainian vision of peace adopted in 2024. We are working on 3 research projects. Our mission is to research, study, advocate, and practice peace as dynamics of life free from violence, and law as norms shaping how we live. We are committed to knowledge-based protection and promotion of human rights to peace and to conscientious objection to military service, development of culture of peace and peace education in Ukraine and worldwide. And as I said, we maintain 3 research projects on conscientious objection, on culture of peace and education for peace, and on Quakerism, which is a pacifist religion. It is part of our pacifist studies. We are seeking for all sorts of knowledge and traditions and perspectives, how popular opinion could be changed so the pacifism could become a mainstream. Also, we have a legal aid clinic for persecuted conscientious objectors to military service. Our motto is Pax de Jure. In Latin, it is peace by law. And I would like to conclude in the end several quotes from the peace agenda and from Ukrainian vision of peace. I hope Hannes will publish my slides and you will find links to full text in the slides. So what kind of peace plan we need? We need to recognize that current policies of war until absolute victory and contempt for criticism of human rights defenders is unacceptable and must be changed. What is needed is a ceasefire, peace talks, and serious work to correct the tragic mistakes made on both sides of the conflict. Prolongation of the war has catastrophic, deadly consequences and continues to destroy the welfare of society and environment not only in Ukraine but throughout the world. Sooner or later, parties will sit at the negotiating table, if not after their reasonable decision, then under the pressure of unbearable suffering and weakening. The last better to be avoided by choosing the diplomatic path. Not corrupted diplomatic path, but knowledge-based in the interest of people. It is wrong to take side of any of the warring armies. It is necessary to stand on the side of peace and justice. Self-defense can and should be carried out by non-violent and unarmed methods. We need the world where the war is abolished and everybody refuses to kill other people. We firmly believe that peace, not war, is the norm of human life. We consider it is an axiom that peace is not equal to war. We support and implement the values of peace, democracy, and justice in our activities. We form and implement a long-term vision of a world without wars and demand that everyone who proposes peace plans must necessarily include in these plans a long-term vision of a peaceful future without wars, a realistic path to eternal peace, and take into account the fair restoration of the rights of Ukrainians as victims of aggression. This important dignity of victim, so that the power of justice, with support of entire peaceful world, restores and reinvigorates the strength and resilience of Ukraine as a victim of Putin's genocidal war of aggression. We support the United Nations in initiatives to build peace through peaceful means and have high hopes for the agenda for future developed in the interests of international development and peace. We hope that world leaders will seize the opportunity to adopt a universal pact for a peaceful future so that politics, economics, science, and technology will work for peace, not for war, to liberate future generations from the yoke of war. We will inspire peaceful people to be strong and courageous in their desire to remain civilians, not soldiers, to protect peaceful life in a peaceful way, to uphold human rights to peace and conscientious objection to military service. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks very much, Yuri, for this very interesting, very extensive view of the situation and your very clear demand for peaceful development. Thanks very much, Dylan. This was really, really great. I would suggest that we go immediately now to Tom, and then after his presentation, we open the floor for discussion. Thanks very much, Yuri, and I open the floor now for Tom. Tom, please.
Yeah, thanks, Hannes, and thanks, Yuri. I'm a political scientist, expert in international politics at the University of Antwerp in Belgium, and currently a visiting scholar at the Nitze School of Advanced International Studies at the Johns Hopkins University in Washington, DC. The starting point of the analysis is, of course, the same as Yuri. The recognition that between 1 and 2 million people have been wounded, killed, especially military, in this nearly 4-year war, as long as the First World War and the Second World War, nearly. There are millions of refugees, economic destruction, consequences also for the rest of the world. It's a tragedy, especially for Ukraine, but not only for Ukraine. And from any neutral or humanitarian point of view, I think the goal should be to stop this war as soon as possible. Preferably with a peace agreement, and ideally a sustainable peace agreement. Is there any chance for such a peace agreement? Question mark. Most observers are skeptical, including my colleague John Mearsheimer from the University of Chicago. We agree, John and I, on the causes of the conflict, but we disagree on the likely outcome. On the causes, I think it's worthwhile to say a little about the causes, because the solution is related to the underlying causes. You are probably aware that the mainstream narrative in the West, both at the political level and in the mainstream media, is that only Putin has to be blamed, only Russia, and they focus as a laser beam on the person of Putin. The problem is Russian expansionism, the Russian imperialism, as some say. Russia wants to go back to the USSR. That's the main mainstream narrative. Now, John Mearsheimer and many others, including myself, do not agree with this analysis. Others are Barry Posen from MIT, Jeffrey Sachs from Columbia University, Stefan Wald from Harvard University. So these are not minor views, although we are a minority if you start counting. In Europe, there is Glenn Diesen in Norway, Jolle Demmers in the Netherlands, Emmanuel Thau and Edgar Morin in France, Jürgen Habermas in Germany. So a small group, but influential. So, and they argue that the biggest mistake has, of course, been made by Russia, and that's new, that also the West has to be blamed. Also, the West has made major mistakes leading to this war. And more in particular, we badly mismanaged the post-Cold War period in the 1990s by keeping NATO into existence, by basically neglecting Russia, humiliating Russia, and by expanding then the same NATO different times, especially then to Georgia and especially Ukraine, which was a big red line for Russia. Russia told us many times that it was a red line, that this is about existential, vital interests of Russia. And from a realist point of view, every student in the first year should understand that. And there were many experts like George Kennan in 98, but also Bill Burns, the ambassador of the United States in Moscow at the time of the Bucharest summit in 2008, and also Europeans that attended that summit in Bucharest, like Merkel and Sarkozy. In 2008 were against NATO expansion for Ukraine, but the Americans pushed it through, Bush, and the consequence is what we see today. The EU, not NATO, tried to do the same, to take Ukraine in the Western sphere of influence in 2013, which led to the Crimea conflict and troubles in the eastern part of Ukraine by Russia, because Russia, of course, knew that if a country is in conflict, it cannot become part of NATO. Then why did Putin then invade Ukraine in 2022? Probably, and you're all speculating, Putin was probably afraid that he would lose the eastern parts of Ukraine because of the stronger connections between NATO and Ukraine between 2014 and 2021. And so he decided to put an end to that, and by invading the country and trying to install a puppet regime in Kiev. He tried to prevent the war in December 21. He sent 2 documents, one to the United States, one to NATO, but the West did not even read the documents. So the war itself, I'm not going through, but there are different stages. And the last stage, since the winter of 2022-23, is basically an attrition war, like in First World War, trenches, stabilized, with Russia slightly winning every day, not much, slice by slice. So that for the analysis of the causes. The solution, I think most of us agree that the only solution is diplomacy, leading to a ceasefire and a peace agreement. Probably first a peace agreement and then a ceasefire, because that is what Russia wants, and Russia is winning on the terrain. So from a neutral negotiation point of view, Ukraine has the most reasons to sit down at the negotiation table. It is losing every day territory. There's a humanitarian catastrophe, all the missiles landing in the Ukrainian cities, on energy grids, and it's much weaker than Russia if you just look to all the criteria of power. Military manpower, much less in Ukraine than in comparison with Russia. Demographically, Russia is much bigger than Ukraine, so more potential military manpower. And you see this already on the terrain, 3-1. Munition and the economic base for making munition, much more powerful in Russia than in Ukraine. And the United States is withdrawing the support for Ukraine. So it doesn't look good for Ukraine. And that is also what you see on the battlefield. And of course, then the people in Ukraine, as far as I can judge by surveys I read, is that the people are getting more and more fed up with the war and getting tired of the war, and which is understandable. Apparently, there were tens of thousands who fled the the front line, young people, are not willing to fight anymore. So again, Ukraine has a huge problem, and it has an interest to sit at the negotiation table, and you see that already. Zelensky, whose popularity is going down, corruption scandals, is more willing to go to the negotiation table. So that's logic. But Russia then also has incentives to negotiate, in my view, but it's a bit less urgent because they're winning on the battlefield. Yeah? So Russia can also negotiate from strength, an advantage, and as long as it is winning on the battlefield, that position even increases. Yeah? But on the other hand, the war economy is not sustainable in Russia either for years. We don't know how many months or years it can continue that, but it won't be years. And Putin knows that. And there's also it's also a humanitarian catastrophe for Russia, of course. So in the end, Russia has also incentives to sit at the negotiation table, but again, less urgent than Ukraine. Luckily, we have at least one mediator, the United States. Since Trump came to power, it was not the case under Biden. Biden chose the side of Ukraine, just like the EU. And so the Biden administration could not mediate. Trump distanced himself from Ukraine, and so he is able to play the role of mediator. Yeah? I'm not saying that he's the most ideal person to do that, but he has a team, and you can criticize the team. But I don't think that the main problem is the team for the moment. The main problem is the points of view, the interests of the two actors, Ukraine and Russia. As Yuri has explained, the Americans have sit down with the Russians, and before already in Saudi Arabia at the ministerial level, in Anchorage, presidential level, more regularly with Witkoff, and even more bilateral meetings between America and Ukraine, yeah? Including the famous Oval Office incident in February of this year. So the recent 28 points peace plan worked out by the United States with strong support of Russia, but apparently also with a couple of phone calls to Ukraine. That has been heavily criticized by Ukraine and by Europe. Then there was a new peace plan proposed by Ukraine, and it goes on. It's going one way to the other, and we are not there yet. But in my view, these peace plans, more than one, are a step forward in comparison with the past. These include indeed the major issues that have to be discussed. So they are now on the table, on paper, and we can discuss this further, either directly between Russia and Ukraine, that would be ideal, but apparently not feasible for the moment, or via a mediator, namely the United States. And maybe we will go in different stages. First, a preliminary framework agreement with a ceasefire, and then further negotiations to work out the details that happened in the past in other conflicts. So what are the major points of contention? I think there are two. It's security and territory. With respect to security, and I'm not talking only about Ukraine, it's also about the security of Russia. There are 5 points. First, the demand by Russia that Ukraine should not become part of NATO, which is also, in my view, a reasonable, legitimate demand from their point of view. NATO is not a peace organization. It's not Pax Christi. It's the biggest, most powerful military alliance ever in world history, spending $1,500 billion a year on defense. So if you see that an alliance coming closer to your borders as a regional power, of course, you do not like that. And if you first ask not to do it, and the alliance does not respond, of course, then you use military means to make clear what your existential and vital interests are. That's realism 101. Yeah? And I think everybody got it, that Ukraine, will not be part of NATO in the immediate and medium term. It has also been even said by some of the Ukrainian higher level politicians and military. And there's no consensus in NATO, so it won't happen. The question is, how should it be stipulated in the Ukrainian constitution, in NATO documents? We can talk about that. Second point, with respect to security, no NATO troops on Ukrainian territory. It's the consequence of the previous point. Yeah? And so no assurance force, the idea of Starmer and Macron, this is a no-go for Russia. Yeah? Another red line for Russia. And they are not going to admit to give in on that. So if there are peacekeeping troops coming, they should come from outside Europe. Yeah? We also need, by the way, drones for monitoring the situation, because only troops will be impossible because of the length of the front line, 2,000 kilometers. Third point of respect to security, the level of armament, the size of the army in both Ukraine and in the Russian part near Ukraine should be limited, ideally. And negotiations can find a compromise on this. And the fourth point on security is that, of course, Ukraine needs security guarantees so that it does not fear another invasion by Russia. Here, I think it will be the current security guarantees given by the West that in case Russia would attack again, which I do not think it will happen, if it's a good peace plan, then the West shall help Ukraine giving arms and money and intelligence, just like we are doing now. And then a last and a very important element of the security issue is, of course, the post-war security order in Europe. Yeah. So if I have time, I will come back to that later on. And I will have a piece coming out later on this week on this particular topic of the security architecture in Europe after the war. Yeah. Then on the territory, that's the second main point of contention. The best is, of course, to stop the war where the front line is. That has happened mostly in the past. And a de facto recognition of the annexed territories by Russia, by the West, not de jure. We are not going to do that. And we can come back on this in 15 years' time by way of referendum. The major difficulty nowadays is with respect to the territory in Donetsk, where Russia has not captured 20% of the oblast, and apparently finds it very important to get that 20%. So from a neutral point of view, I would say that's not what it should be, because Russia has not got that territory by fighting. But if you look from a broader perspective, I'm afraid that Russia probably will win this territory by negotiations. If they give something back, it's up to Ukraine, of course, to decide. If Ukraine wants to fight, to continue to fight, then Ukrainians will have to do that and will do that. But I think most observers then predict that Ukraine will lose even more territory and people. So I think, again, it's not in the national interest for Ukraine doing that. Now, other minor points, not minor points, but a bit less important than security and territory that have to be discussed are, for instance, nuclear energy, the rights of minorities, language, religion, in both Ukraine and Russian parts, the next parts. The Russian-US relationship, of course, economically and maybe more new opportunities for arms control. The ICJ case against Putin, versus amnesty. I think we will never get to a solution if Putin will have to go to The Hague afterwards. The economic sanctions against Russia have to be dismantled gradually, maybe with snapback mechanism like in Iran. Ukraine has to be reconstructed. So who's going to pay? Question mark. Ukraine can become part of EU in the longer term. These are all points that have to be discussed as well. So to conclude this part is that I think both Ukraine and Russia will have to give and take. That's per definition a compromise. That is minimally acceptable for both leaders and their base, both in Ukraine and in Russia. It will not be a fair deal, especially not for Ukraine. Again, it is Russia that is winning, Ukraine that is losing on the battlefield. But the question is for Ukraine and for everybody else, is there a better alternative than such a peace deal? And again, I do not think so, especially not for Ukraine. So Ukraine has to give in on territory, on NATO membership, and it will limit the armament and military manpower. But it will win, and it should be told as well, it will win sovereignty, democracy. It can become a democracy for the first time. It will become part of the Western sphere of influence, something that Putin never wanted, but it will be a fact. It may become a member of the EU in the medium or longer term. It will be armed, something that Putin did not want, and it will get security guarantees. So it's not only a loss for Ukraine. These are only pluses. Russia will win on territory and the fact that Ukraine becomes a buffer state, a neutral buffer state, not part of NATO. But Russia will have to give in on sovereignty of Ukraine, on the fact that it will be part of the Western sphere of influence and possibly the EU, on democracy, something that he didn't want, Putin, and on the armaments in Ukraine. So I think overall, these peace plans may end up in a peace agreement if everybody is serious and willing to negotiate. There are two dangers. The quality of the mediator, Mr. Trump, not very patient. Luckily, there are people around him that are probably more patient, but you can also criticize his team. And secondly, and it has not been mentioned, I think, is the role of the EU. I think it's not very constructive. It's only supporting Ukraine. It's refusing to use the main instrument of international politics, namely diplomacy. It does not talk directly to Russia, which is a shame. If we want solution for Ukraine and for Europe, and especially about talking, if we want a new security architecture, we have to talk to Russia. So, but for the moment, all these leaders in Europe, Merz, Starmer, Macron, refuse to talk to Putin. So that's structurally wrong. And I do not understand this. I have the impression that Brussels is living in a bubble. There's a kind of pensée unique. They started something a couple of years ago, and it's very hard to change this tanker from to go in another direction. By definition, because these are 27, 28 member states, they have to agree, which is, of course, very difficult. I understand that from a political scientist point of view. But here we see the main disadvantage of the European Union. And again, I'm a big fan of the European Union, but here we see some of the costs of working together. So I will stop maybe here and leave the post-war security architecture for the Q&A.
Thanks very much, Tom, for this outline and very interesting points of thought. Thanks very much. I stop now the recording and then ask for questions.